the first act of Wicked is a is a very, very strong, like self-contained narrative with its own kind of arc, with its own distinct setting, and kind of is pretty chock full of big Broadway smash hits like Popular and Defying Gravity and Loathing and No One Wants the Wicked. Like the song, like it's in a movie landscape that seems to be afraid of musicals. It wasn't afraid to wear like that on its skin, and it had the catalog to back that up. Which puts the sequel in a really interesting position because, Cian, how much do you know about Wicked, like, as a whole of this?
I've listened to the soundtrack. I haven't seen it live, but I work in, like, a theater school, so I kind of know it by osmosis. I know Wicked falls into... Now, to be fair, this is a problem that most musicals have, which is that the first hour and a half is, like, all your big hits, all your big numbers, and the second half, which is usually about 45 minutes, usually involves reprieves and restating songs and that kind of stuff. But that's by design. That's because by that point, people are kind of full and they kind of just want the rest of it and then want to go home. Like, you know, so it's not a fault of Wicked the musical. It does kind of push, like, as you're about to kind of allude to, the putting structure of Wicked into two parts, a bit of an uphill battle.
Yeah, precisely that. Because in, like, you know, as you said, in the format of a stage play where it's all one piece with just a small break in between, the problems can be noticeable, but it's not like it's not the be all end all. You just remember the first half and think, yeah, that was great. When you split it into two distinct movies that are released 1 year after the other, so you have like a year's break in between, you kind of have to separate it and take that second part on its own. And I think, like, to your credit, like, you make a very sound point about like about just the second act of musicals as a whole. I think Wicked is notorious in like theater circles for having that kind of second act syndrome.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, as I said, the first act taking place in like the School of Shiz and having, you know, the kind of the relationship dynamic of Glinda and Elphaba, like, getting to know each other, first hating each other, like enemies to lovers arc.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Or your anime typical thing, yeah.
Yeah, like that's, and then having it all kind of build up to this grand reveal about the wizard. Like, it is a very, like, structurally sound arc. And then, of course, that being capped off by Defying Gravity, which is kind of like one of the, like, big showstoppers of all time, really then just kind of puts into like such a distinct spotlight of its just sheer drop in quality, only emphasized by the fact that it's Act 2 that decides to start weaving in a lot of like narrative elements from like Elfram, like the actual plot of The Wizard of Oz.
Which is peculiar when you think about it, because let's just wind the clock back to when Wicked initially came out. Obviously, I know it's based on a book, but like, what would have got people in the door is The Wizard of Oz. So you would think, in theory, that the musical would have to spin its wheels a bit to get to what people recognize, which is Tin Man, Soldier, Little Dog 2. So it's really weird that actually the draw is not only in the second half, but it's the bit people like less. In a weird roundabout way, it kind of speaks to the power of what's good about Wicked is the original stuff.
Oh, certainly. But it's also, again, because of that, it's like there's also like a weird kind of copyright situation about that, because I don't know what like the copyright situation between, like, obviously the book was kind of working off like at a fair use laws, and also the book is pretty distinct beast from the musical, because the book is also extremely edgy.
Well, I can answer some of these questions. Lindsay Ellis does a good video called Loose Cannon, which is about all the interpretations of the Wicked Witch. And basically, I'm going to like kind of paraphrase this a little bit, but stuff that was created for the Wizard of Oz movie. such as the color of her skin, the costume, the witch, any original elements, they are protected by copyright. Things from the book, broadly conceptually, like the characters in a very broad sense, they are up for grabs. So it's very much like, do you remember that years ago they did the movie film Tolkien without the rights? Yes, used Lord of the Rings, or indeed the Amazon thing. It's one of those situations. They can dance around it, but if, for example, they say somewhere over the rainbow, that's not allowed. Anything that we created originally is off limits.
Yeah. So, and because this isn't, I can't remember, because I think it's MGM owned the Wizard, like the original 30 Wizard of Oz, and I think this was being made by Universal. So like it's not the same studio that made the original. Like that's Disney has notoriously been trying to get the rights from MGM.
Yes, that what's it called? That James Franco film years ago was
the absolute abomination that hit Oz the Great and Powerful. Awful movie. That's like okay. At the very least, I could say that Wicked for Good is better than Oz the Great and Powerful.
High praise indeed.
But all this to say that like the part two of Wicked does have to still kind of do the plays thing of integrating the plot of the Wizard of Oz, but also dancing around what people would know the most from it. Yeah, whilst, but like it does that by still kind of focusing in on, you know, the things that part one had, like that act one had established of, like, you know, the relationship between Glinda and Elphaba, the betrayal of the wizard, the animal rights stuff. That's all, like, that's kind of the main focus. And I will say, where I did think the second act of the play when I saw it in the West End was very weak, and especially coming straight off of that first act, straight out of Defying Gravity, like that's back to back, it is a pretty sheer drop in quality. The second Wicked for Good is better than the second act of Wicked.
Okay.
I think like what they add, because as you mentioned, the second act of plays are about like an hour. They're not long. They're not as long as the first part. And that then, like, this has to be now extracted out to 2.5 hours. It's not a short movie. I'll say, like, the pacing was never actually an issue when I was watching the movie. I think they managed to fill it out quite well. And the character interactions that they kind of bulk it out with are good, because the thing I praised in the first movie, the character performances are still extremely good.
Okay.
Arrivo and Grande
back to back, like
they must have, like, the fact that they came out within a year of each other, they must have had this as like a one straight filming session. They like you almost assuredly so. So, like, that's, yeah, the character performances are still good. The plot, while odd, it doesn't solve any of the inherent issues with the second part of Wicked in how, like, it tries to kind of integrate the Wizard of Oz. The character performances do still get it. Now, it does, and the other thing, though, is that the songs are also quite, like, not nearly as strong. The back half of Wicked is so bulked out with, like, very somber, lower belt.
Yeah.
So you don't
no big good mood hits, like.
No, and like it's a much kind of like darker tone. Things are a bit more dire. There's a lot more tension. There's not like as much kind of like sheer joy to go around. I'd say like kind of the biggest showstopper it has is No Good Deed, which I only really copped was pretty big and good when I was watching the movie. Because
this is what I was going to ask, because they've added a few songs, haven't they, to kind of pad it out?
Did, and I didn't really notice it because they're kind of a similar quality to, like, the two, I'd say, like, the worst of the originals.
This is a standard thing. Like, it happened with Cats as well, where they'll add a new song so that the entire catalogue of songs, despite not being original, will then be eligible for awards and that kind of stuff come Oscar season. Like, there's one song no one remembers in a Les Mis movie. It's only a minute long to put it eligible and that kind of thing. Like, you know, now I suspect that, there's more practical reasons for his new song, which is that there's probably only about 7 or 8 songs in the back end of Wicked. But that